Hello and welcome back to another Digging the Game. In this series we play computer games as archaeologists. Archaeo gaming is what we're up to, and this is a whole branch of archaeology where there are genuine benefits to be had from exploring digital worlds and thinking as an archaeologist. Sometimes we uncover the in-game history of a world, literally the ruins of the world that's been created by computer game developers, and that's something that we're going to be looking at today. Sometimes it's possible to find the literal history of the games, maybe development dead ends, little artifacts that are left behind in the glitchy code of a game, and actually that can tell you about the history of the computer game itself. But beyond that, and beyond the fact that we're studying computer games also as artifacts in that sense, it's also often useful to archaeologists to reflect on the real world based upon some of the thoughts that occur to them when playing computer games or when exploring some of these virtual worlds. Often these worlds demand a fresh perspective, and that can be very useful when it comes to thinking about sites that are very familiar to us. So actually there's a whole range of benefits to playing computer games as archaeologists, and today is part 3 of my seemingly ongoing series in the computer game The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now today, well, first of all, I'm dressed as a bit of a monster. As you can see, I've got a slightly silly hat on, and I'm in a slightly silly mood. But we are hopefully going to have some good archaeological fun along the way. We're just starting out at a stable, and this is my lovely trusty horse, Epona, and we are located for today's video just here, next to the dueling peaks, and we're going to be moving across the ash swamp to Fort Hateno, and eventually to the little valley here that contains the Camrog Shrine. Now this particular portion of the game is rich in-game archaeology, as it were, so we're going to be seeing lots of archaeology. It's also rich in potential for reflection on what that archaeology means, and today we're going to be meeting an archaeologist. Yes, this computer game has its own resident archaeologist. Now, in the past, I have praised the archaeology of Zelda Breath of the Wild for having a coherence, a sort of an in-game history that is reflected in the archaeology that's left behind. The story is there to be read, and in particular, for example, in our first episode when we looked at the ruins around the Temple of Time, there's a logic to those ruins and a story that tells you about perhaps how the area was being used prior to its destruction, what it was like when the area was being destroyed and attacked by giant sort of robotic monsters, which we will see here as well in just a moment, and also as well the physical decay of those ruins. There's a really good logic there, and I really appreciate that. Sadly though, this area, the ash swamps or swamp, reveals that this is in fact a designed world. This is a computer game, and this little portion of ruins in particular really highlights that. It slightly annoys me, actually. It takes me out of the archaeology of this game, because this little portion makes no sense. What is this little building? Is it a garden area? Perhaps maybe I'm here between two rather well finished low walls with the top of the walls intact. Maybe this is some sort of garden corridor with a doorway that goes in here, and then what on earth is that archway? That makes no sense at all. It wasn't historically connected to this wall here, for example. This wall is nice and crisp and clean. You can see the surface of the wall there. There's no hints that these two were ever connected. What is this space just here that I'm standing in, if this is meant to be a coherent archaeological ruin? This archway in particular really reveals that this little set of walls was placed here by a game designer. In fact, all across here we have ruins which are scattered and make no real sense. Was this some giant building, or meant to be a giant building in the past? Was this a series of small buildings? Was this supposed to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of giant cathedral space? The answer is none of that. The answer is this has been designed as a ruined landscape. And I can really highlight that when we look at this little section of ruins here, because this section of ruins here is copied and pasted from the ruins that we were just looking at. We have wall, archway, the weird little space here, the fact that this section doesn't connect to that section in a way that makes sense. We can pass through here, and here we have our low wall again, and there we have it. This whole area is such a letdown in terms of the in-game archaeology. It's a bit of a shame in that sense. It does destroy the illusion that everywhere in this game has a coherent archaeological story to tell. Then again, this is where the other element of archaeogaming comes in. This tells us precisely something about how the game designers approached the design of this space. As a digital artifact, we know that this little set of ruins was copied and pasted from one spot to another, and that in itself is a valid discovery in that sense. We can tell something about the approach to designing these landscapes. The fact that actually maybe what they're doing is they're copying and pasting assets in a artistically pleasing way so as to develop and produce a certain effect. So you know, it just as in a real archaeological dig, sometimes you don't find something in your test pit and that's still a valid result. Well, just then we came across something which is a bit of a slip up when it comes to in-game archaeology, but actually is a little gem when it comes to understanding the design of the game. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So don't be too disappointed sometimes when you see that, because actually, especially in a computer game like this, such obvious design flaws, I suppose, or certainly design repetition is few and far between. It's hard to come by. So in some respects, I'm quite pleased we spotted that. Anyway, here we come to a highlight of the archaeology of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and this is Fort Hateno. Fort Hateno 100 years ago was besieged by these robot monsters. I just deal with these guys here. This guy in particular. Go away. He's an assassin who always carries bananas. There you go. Mighty bananas and rupees. Yes, this fort, Fort Hateno, was besieged 100 years ago by these robotic monsters. These are the same guardian monsters that we saw attacking and indeed frozen in the moment of attacking the Temple of Time in episode 1. And I really like the way that actually we have the ruins of the fort in a few different stages. We have the fort as it was. We have the fact that the guardians have been tearing at the fort and leaving chunks of masonry on the floor all over the place. But then also actually we have a sort of a post-destruction reconstruction. We have the wooden elements of the fort, or certainly of these attempts to reconstruct parts of the fort. And this makes me think of the relationship between the Saxons and the Romans. The Romans built in stone, the Saxons built in wood. And I've talked in the past in another video about, for example, there's a very famous poem called The Ruin, where there's a Saxon poet reflecting on the giants who built in stone, and how it's implied how the Saxons basically can't replicate that yet. They could, when it comes, you know, there were a couple of notable exceptions when it comes to church buildings, building in the Roman style, as it was called. But here we have something similar. We have people trying to sort of rebuild elements, or maybe even just sort of shore up a decaying structure using wood. And actually, this whole structure here, I'm inclined to believe, is possibly built and maintained by the resident archaeologist who's studying this fort. Now, what's also really cool is that this fort in the game has folk history. The stories that people tell about archaeological sites are really important in the real world and also in computer game worlds. And here we have a chap called Garrel. I'm just going to wake him up. Hello, Garrel. Oh, he'd love to keep jawing with you about Fort Hateno and the warrior, don't get me wrong, but I'm observing a moment of silence for the warrior and his troops who fought to the last against the Guardians. We can pick it up again in the morning. Okay, fair enough. But nonetheless, this guy here is here essentially making partly a pilgrimage and partly a historical visit to this this ruin because it's so important for the history, as he sees it, of his of his existence. In fact, the fact that there was a siege here that was successfully defended, he sees as part of the reason for him being here. In that sense, it makes it feel a little bit like when people visit First World War cemeteries, you know, in the real world. We have here Garrel deliberately coming here to reflect upon that. Actually, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to sit by the fire till morning and have a chat with him. Okay, Garrel, come on, wake up. It's morning. Oh, don't say that again. It is the morning. Okay, well, while you're deciding to get up, I'll just go for a bit of a wander. We can actually tell other things about this area. Not only was it attacked, and we can see, as I say, the evidence of the siege in front of the walls, but actually behind the walls there is some evidence of perhaps the movement of people, perhaps the refugee crisis, as it were, that unfolded here 100 years ago, where people were desperate to get behind the wall to safety. We have here, for example, the ruins of a wagon, which has presumably been left behind for at least 100 years. It certainly looks like it. And also the ruins of some sort of campsite just here. Let's get rid of these blobs. There we go. We have the ruins of a campsite here as well. You can just about see evidence of some cloth on the ground there, which is just in front of me, just here. We have the cargo and some bits and bobs which have been left behind from that time. And yeah, okay, it's a small hint, but it's a little hint again of people stopping here. Perhaps stopping for trade, perhaps they're stopping for the sake of it. But actually, I suspect once you get beyond that wall to safety and you're surrounded by trees, the first thing you want to do when you're on the run from dangerous monsters is stop and rest for a bit. Speaking of which, our friend is now up and about. Okay, Garrel, hello. The warrior and his soldiers at Fort Hateno risked their lives to protect the world. I wasn't there at the time, but I'm alive now because of them, and I've got to make sure future generations know it. You see, it's an in-game folk history, which is crucial to the understanding of this monument. Actually, also crucial to the understanding of an element of the story of the computer game, actually. But I won't ruin that here. And I love it. I absolutely love that there are people visiting monuments in this game and reflecting upon what the monument means for their personal history, their existence. Now, actually, it's worthwhile just taking a moment just to pause here and stop at this cabin. This is actually the cabin of the resident archaeologist. Calip is his name. And it's first thing in the morning, so I think he's probably headed off to his archaeological site. But let's just take a look around his fairly Spartan quarters. And I quite like this. This is, again, just similar to what happens in the real world on archaeological sites, especially when archaeologists are in any place for any length of time. They usually have to build a semi-permanent structure to live in. Oh, here's Calip as you come in because it's raining. Today's research trip is on hold. My glasses are unfortunately metallic. In this weather, my life could be at risk. Oh, what do you mean? I don't mind a little rain, but the lightning in Hyrule is alarmingly attracted to anything metallic. On days like this, it's best to shut oneself in and wait for the rain to clear. If you must go gallivanting across the countryside, take care you don't get struck at least. Okay, fair enough. Well, let's sleep until tomorrow morning, shall we? Now then, Calip will eventually head off to his archaeological dig, so let's head over there and meet him there. Now, at the moment, Calip is engaged in research just a little bit up the valley and to the left here. And actually, this little portion of the valley is, again, it's one of those elements which I find pleasing in so much as it is a believable place to find the sort of archaeology that is to be found here. This, if you look at it on the map, is a small little offshoot of the valley just there. So we've come up from Fort Hateno just here, the wall, come up the pathway, and the little offshoots just off the path. And in this area, we immediately start to find little bits of archaeology scattered on the floor. These come in the shape of these sort of statues, these anthropomorphic statues, many of which have been toppled. So actually, if we just zoom in here, we can see one that's on its side. There's one that stood up. There we go. It's quite funky. So not only carved, but also it seems painted as well, actually. I'll just deal with these guys. There we go. Carved and painted, and very much Japanese in style. This is the sort of sacred grove kind of area that you see in secluded areas of Japan, and also actually, frankly, in for example, Japanese animations, such as say Spirited Away, for example. At the beginning of that game, there's an area like this. But not only do we have the evidence of this little grove where we have all these small anthropomorphic statues, probably representing spirits or gods or sometimes important people, but also we have a little bit of evidence of formal structure. We have a column here that I'm standing on. We have a part of an arched window just here. Are there any other elements? There's some evidence of a paved floor, I guess, if we look down. What else can we see? Oh, there's an emblazoned shield. There's another element of a column just here. So you have a fairly complex series of things going on here, which I have to say I don't fully understand. I think, again, this does sort of hint at the fact that this is a designed space, but perhaps, I suppose, if we're not so cynical about it, this is an area where people have been coming for a long time. Maybe they've been placing these statues bit by bit in remembrance of something or in deference to something. Perhaps this little valley area has significance in terms of maybe some sort of element of memorial, given that the fort is just around the corner. This could be an area where people come to remember those people who died at the siege. It could be that this little offshoot valley is considered to have its own spirit or its own entity that deserves deference as well. There's an awful lot that you can say about this area, and this sort of formalised structure that's been over time eroded and fallen down, I think also hints that people had a formal sense of the need to come here and honour the place, as it were. Now it's raining again, and our archaeologist, in slightly unrealistic fashion, I have to say, most archaeologists are fairly hardy people, is staying away from the site. Let's see if it gets any better when it gets sunny. So here he is, finally. Honestly, a little bit of rain stopping you getting to your current life's work. What sort of archaeologist are you? Where's your raincoat? Now, Calip has been quite entertaining, actually, throughout the game, because actually the blue shrine at the end there, which I was avoiding talking about, wasn't there initially, and he was coming here every day, Calip, to try and understand this area, because there was a rumour about something like a blue shrine rising out of the ground. I shan't spoil that, because it is an element of the game that you might want to recover for yourself. Let's see what he has to say. A shrine here, but I hadn't completed my inquiry into the mystery of the ancient texts. This must be what in the archaeology profession, we refer to as a stroke of luck. Not that I believe in any such thing. Okay. But yeah, so he's been studying this little area for a long time, and I came along and solved the riddle and brought the blue shrine up out of the ground, which clearly has both intrigued him and slightly frustrated him, because early on in the game he does refer to how he needs to keep a lid on some of this information for the purpose of publishing, which again I find to be quite a pleasing archaeological little detail. Many archaeologists are like that, I have to say. Not all archaeologists are eager to talk about their research, and Calip, he rides that line between being a jealous academic and a genuine man of intrigue, investigation, and the pursuit of knowledge. So this is his archaeological site. Despite the fact that I'm riding a horse through it, I really do very much appreciate it. And I appreciate, again, the fact that this whole area, ranging from what could be some sort of memorial to the ruins of the fort, it really does feel like an area where something happened 100 years ago. Frankly, even just the trees, the fact that trees have been allowed to grow so close to this sort of fortified structure, hints at the amount of time that's passed since it was last in active use as a fort or a checkpoint for the military. I like it. I do appreciate it. And once again, this game continues to be a wonderful archaeological experience. If you ever get a chance to play Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, whether it be on Switch or, as I do, on the Wii U, definitely give it a go. Not only is it a great game, but it's also a great archaeology game. And next time I have some archaeology to examine up in the mountains and also in the jungles. But I think today's been a good, solid episode. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.